My signature was on the screen. The problem was, I had never signed it. For half a second, I honestly thought this was some kind of branding mistake. A lazy graphic, a placeholder. Then the camera zoomed in. And there it was. The elegant, slightly tilted R. The thin line I always drew under the H. Even the tiny break in the curve I'd developed after a college internship ruined my wrist. My signature. Huge. Floating. Projected above a stage filled with biocapsules glowing soft medical blue. The closed conference hall was silent in the way expensive rooms always are. Soundproofed, sterile, padded with money. Rows of investors. Doctors in tailored coats. Alphas with predatory stillness. Omegas with sharp, controlled posture. Betas like me. Trained to smile and not take up too much space. I was here as the face of Hale Venture Group's biotech division. The safe son. The reliable one. The beta who managed risk so the alphas could pretend they were visionaries. I adjusted my cufflinks, preparing for the polite applause that usually followed innovation pitches. Instead, a man's voice cut through the room. And this, he said, is where medicine ends and trafficking begins. The speaker stepped forward into the light. Simon, founder of the startup everyone was whispering about. Alpha, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back loosely, lab coat open over a black shirt like he hadn't bothered to dress for investors. His presence didn't fill the stage. It sharpened it. The screens shifted. Data streams, medical diagrams, then, financial flow map, and at the center of it, like a spider in a crystal web, was my family's logo. Hale Venture Group. A ripple of murmurs went through the audience. My pulse stayed annoyingly calm. Trained. If this story caught you, subscribe. More are waiting. This was why I existed. Until the document opened. Contract. Authorization. Long list of shell companies. And at the bottom, Ryan Hale, Managing Director. Signed. My lungs forgot what they were supposed to do. That contract, Simon continued, his eyes lifting from the screen to the room, funded facilities. Now under investigation for illegal extraction and sale of omega biomaterial. A doctor in the front row whispered, "That's not legal," Simon finished coldly. "No, it isn't." His gaze moved, locked, on me. For a strange, stupid moment, my first thought wasn't I'm being accused. It was, he smells like winter and smoke. Not an omega's sweetness, not an alpha's usual dominance, something cleaner, sharper, like cold air rushing into lungs that had forgotten how to expand. My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with panic. "Ryan Hale," Simon said, voice amplified, precise. "You manage the fund that approved these investments. Would you like to explain why your signature appears on contracts tied to biological exploitation?" Every head turned. I stood because standing was what men in my position did. Calm, controlled, vertical. "There must be a misunderstanding," I said, and my voice was steady enough to make me want to punch something. "Our fund does not and has never invested in illegal research." Simon tilted his head. "So you're saying this is forged?" "I'm saying," I replied, "that you are presenting manipulated data." A few investors nodded. Someone scoffed. Simon didn't raise his voice, didn't posture. He just touched the tablet in his hand. The document rotated, expanded. Biometric verification lit up green. Timestamp logs, authorization trails. My signature replicated across years of deals. "You're very consistent," he said quietly. "Even your pressure patterns match." A bead of sweat slid down my spine. "That's impossible," I said. He met my eyes. "Then someone taught your impossibility to lie." The room started buzzing. Security shifted near the walls. A woman near the aisle covered her mouth. Somewhere, someone was already messaging lawyers. I should have countered, redirected, threatened. Instead, my focus tunneled stupidly on Simon's hands. Long fingers, a faint scar along the knuckle. The way his jaw flexed like he was holding back something sharper than words. Anger, not at the fund, at me. "You think I'd sign something like that?" I snapped. "I think," he replied, stepping closer to the edge of the stage. That whether you did or not, your name made it possible. The words landed heavier than the accusation. Because names mattered. Mine always had. That's not proof of intent, I said. No, Simon agreed. It's proof of impact. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was crowded with judgment. With suspicion. With the sudden, nauseating thought that my life might be built on paperwork I'd never touched. I left the room without waiting to be dismissed. Past the glowing capsules. Past the murmuring crowd. Past the future I had walked into, convinced I understood. My reflection in the glass wall looked wrong. Paler. Sharper. Like someone had shifted the resolution. My phone vibrated. The fund. Already. I didn't answer. Behind me I felt it again, that strange pull in my chest, like gravity adjusting to a new center. I didn't look back, but I knew he was watching me, and that whatever had just cracked open wasn't on that screen. It was inside me. The elevator was made of glass so no one would forget how high we were. City below, money above. I stood alone inside it, hands folded, posture flawless, watching my reflection multiply across the transparent walls. Same suit. Same controlled expression. Same beta who'd learned early that stillness was safer than space. The conference hall replayed itself behind my eyes on a loop. My signature. Simon's voice. The word impact like a bruise you don't see until later. The elevator chimed softly as it climbed toward the top floors of Hale Venture Group. Our floors. The ones no one visited without a reason and a background check. My phone buzzed again. Mother. I exhaled through my nose and answered before the third vibration. Ryan, she said. Not hello. Not, are you all right? Just my name. Perfectly neutral. Come directly to the council room. Of course. The doors slid open. The fund's office smelled like citrus polish and something colder beneath it. Filtered air. Filtered people. The kind of place where emotions were liabilities in glass meant transparency only when it was decorative. Assistants nodded. Analysts looked away. Everyone knew. The council room waited at the end of the corridor, dark wood and muted lights, designed to make voices softer and decisions heavier. My family was already seated. My mother at the head, back straight, silver hair in a smooth, severe line. Once, when I was 10, she told me composure was a form of respect. For others. For yourself. For the institution. To her right sat my older brother Daniel. Alpha. Public face of the fund. Perfect smile that never quite reached his eyes. They didn't rise when I entered. Sit, Daniel said pleasantly, gesturing to the chair opposite them. I did. Interesting performance, he added. Very dramatic. It wasn't a performance, I replied. Mother's gaze settled on me. Cool. Assessing. It was an exposure risk. The words slid neatly into place, like blocks she'd arranged long before I walked in. Your presence there, she continued, gave that man credibility. He accused us of trafficking. He accused us of investing, she corrected. Language matters. A familiar, quiet heat started under my ribs. There was a document, I said. With my name. Daniel smiled. You sign hundreds of documents, Ryan. I don't sign illegal ones. No, Mother said calmly. You sign what you're given. The room stilled. She leaned forward slightly, fingers interlaced. And that is why you are invaluable. The word landed wrong. You're our ideal interface, she went on. Non-confrontational. Precise. Trustworthy. Regulators like you. Boards like you. You translate volatility into stability. Daniel nodded. You make us look safe. Something in my chest tightened. I manage portfolios, I said. Not public perception. You manage outcomes, Mother replied, which includes perception. I thought of Simon's eyes on me. Sharp, accusing, uninterested in how things looked. What do you want me to do? I asked. Contain it, Daniel said. This startup, its founder, his narrative, Mother's gaze didn't waver. We'll have legal reach out. You will formally question the data. You will remind investors of our ethical standards. Our, I echoed. Yes, she said. Ours. And if he's right? The words were out before I'd approved them. Daniel's smile thinned. He isn't. Mother tilted her head. And even if he were, we would handle it internally. By burying it? By managing it, she said. Ryan, you are not here to feel. You are here to ensure continuity. The heat under my ribs turned heavy. She studied me the way one studies a system. You are very good at this. That is why you exist in this role. Not why you were chosen. Why you exist. You'll take care of it, she finished. Like you always do. The meeting ended the way all of ours did. Without ceremony, without dissent. I stood. They didn't. As I left, Daniel's voice followed me lightly. Try not to look so wounded. It doesn't suit you. The hallway felt longer than before. The glass walls reflected me again, but now the image had shifted. The same suit. The same face. Only this time I could see the leash. Polished. Invisible. And tight. Simon's startup occupied the kind of building my family never invested in. Concrete instead of marble. Real windows instead of tinted walls. The lobby smelled like disinfectant, coffee, and something faintly metallic. The honest scent of work being done, not wealth being preserved. I checked in at a minimalist desk, ignored the curious looks, and followed the signs toward research. Every step felt like friction. Anger was easier than confusion. Anger I could organize. A glass door slid open, and suddenly I was standing in the middle of a living lab. Biocapsules lined one wall, smaller and less theatrical than the ones at the conference. Medical monitors pulsed softly. White boards were crowded with half-erased formulas and aggressive handwriting. A couple of technicians glanced up, startled, then quickly pretended they hadn't. Simon stood near a central work table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, latex gloves snapping off his hands. He looked up. Oh, there it was again. That shift in the air. Not dominance. Not heat. Just awareness. Like my body had received a memo my mind hadn't opened yet. Well, he said, if it isn't the fund... I'm not here for theatrics, I replied. I'm here because you put my name on a criminal network in front of half the biotech sector. You put your name on it long before I did, he said, dropping the gloves into a bin. I didn't sign those documents. Then you should be very interested in who did. I'm interested, I snapped, in why you're staging public accusations instead of submitting evidence. He arched a brow. Because evidence submitted quietly disappears. I stepped closer. Or because outrage is easier than accuracy. Simon studied me. Not the suit. Not the fund. Me. Then, he turned without a word and gestured sharply. Come on. He led me deeper into the lab, past glass partitions and humming equipment, to a wall-sized screen. Data bloomed to life. Supply routes. Corporate shells. Medical shipments. Your fund, he said, pointing, feeds capital into 3 holding companies. Those companies invest in regenerative research. That research extracts biological material from omegas under the label of clinical donation. That's regulated, I said. It's laundered, he corrected. After extraction, those materials don't go to hospitals. They go to private labs and black market pharmaceutical manufacturers. The screen shifted. Images of sterile rooms that were too bare, too cold. And this, Simon continued, is where your money actually ends up. I crossed my arms. You're building a narrative. I'm mapping a system. Without proof of intent. He glanced at me. Intent doesn't uncut tissue. I opened my mouth. Paused. Because my focus slid sideways, stupidly, traitorously, to the place where his pulse moved under his jaw, to the faint warmth in the air around him, to the way his scent cut through antiseptic and metal like smoke through snow. My chest tightened again. I shifted my weight. You're manipulating interpretation. You're hiding behind language. I'm asking for verification. I'm asking why you're more offended than alarmed. The words hit. Because, I said sharply, you're accusing my family of trafficking bodies. He didn't look away. I'm accusing your fund of profiting from them. Silence. Then, unexpectedly, he exhaled and motioned toward a smaller room. Coffee? He asked. You look like someone about to fracture a molar. Against my better judgment, I followed. The coffee area was cramped, warm, crowded with mismatched mugs and a very aggressive espresso machine. Simon poured without asking and slid a cup toward me. I didn't take it. You enjoy this, I said. Provoking, cornering. I enjoy medicine that doesn't require suffering, he replied. Everything else is overhead. I finally picked up the cup. The heat grounded me. You've already decided I'm guilty, I said. I've decided your name is attached to harm, he countered. Whether that makes you criminal or convenient is what I'm trying to figure out. I laughed once, sharp. Convenient? He watched me over the rim of his mug. You don't strike me as someone who chooses his cages. The word cage echoed unpleasantly. I manage risk, I said. You dramatize it. He smiled faintly. You monetize it. I should have ended the meeting, issued formal warnings, left. Instead, I found myself asking, who started this investigation? Me, he said. After my sister died, the air changed. Omega, he added. Experimental treatment. Private lab. No oversight. The room hummed. You think this is personal, I said more softly. I know it is, he replied. And I know systems that profit from silence when I see them. He met my eyes again. For what it's worth, Simon said, if you're lying, you're very good at it. And if I'm not, then, he answered, you're standing on a fault line you didn't know existed. Something in my chest cracked. Just a little. Enough to let doubt in. The archive level of Hale Venture Group didn't exist on any public floor plan. No windows. No reception. Just a long descent of brushed steel and biometric locks, each one stripping away another layer of daylight until the building felt less like an office and more like a vault. I shouldn't have been there. That was the first thing I felt, even before suspicion fully settled into my bones. The second was a strange, almost childish defiance. If my name was being used, I wanted to know how far back the theft went. I authorized access with my thumbprint, then my retina, then the secondary code I'd never once needed outside disaster drills. The door opened without ceremony. Rows of illuminated data columns rose from the floor like frozen rain. Each contained financial records, encrypted contracts, internal correspondence, the long memory of the fund. My family's true inheritance. I started with the obvious: high-risk biotech investments, regenerative research, anything that had touched secondary markets. At first, everything aligned. Then, small things didn't. Meeting attendance logs with my name attached to time slots I couldn't remember. Approval timestamps that landed during flights, during conferences, during nights I'd spent very deliberately not in the building. I zoomed in on a contract from 6 years ago. The signature glowed softly at the bottom. Mine. I pulled up my calendar from that year. I'd been in Zurich. The system insisted I'd been in San Francisco. I swallowed. Once is coincidence. Twice is error. 3 times is a problem. I didn't stop at 3. By the time my eyes burned and my jaw ached from clenching, I had 17. 17 instances where my authorization appeared in 2 places at once. 17 tiny ruptures in a life I'd believed was meticulously documented. I wasn't breathing properly. I left the archive when the hum of servers began to sound like voices. The night kitchen was empty, lights dimmed to soft gold. Someone had left a bowl of citrus on the counter. The smell hit too bright, too alive. And for a moment I just stood there, hands braced on cold stone, letting my pulse settle into something resembling rhythm. Ryan? I turned. Lena Park hovered near the doorway, tablet held against her chest like a shield. Omega, mid-20s, analytical team, quiet, unassuming, brilliant, in the way people only noticed when projections landed perfectly. Sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean to startle you. They said you were still here. I was finishing something, I replied. Her eyes flicked past me, down the hall. Listening. We stood in the careful silence of employees who knew the building was always awake. You shouldn't be in the archive alone, she said. Neither should you, I returned. A corner of her mouth twitched. I'm rarely alone. That wasn't reassurance. She hesitated. Then, softly, the conference today, it caused a lot of internal traffic. I imagine, I said. Her fingers tightened on the tablet. There are packages, Lena continued. Investment bundles, pre-assembled, high yield. They circulate before they're logged. Circulate where? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her tablet and angled the screen just enough for me to see. A blurred transaction ID, a familiar internal code, prefix. My division. They arrive, she said, choosing each word like it might cut her. Already approved. I stared at the screen. By whom? Her throat worked. By whoever signs them, she said. The air between us thickened. I don't remember approving these, I said quietly. Lena's gaze lifted to mine. I don't think, she replied, that remembering is part of the process. Footsteps echoed faintly somewhere above. She straightened instantly, sliding the tablet back against her chest, posture resetting into professional neutrality. I should go, she said. Lena, I called. She paused. If you were in my position, I asked, what would you do? Her answer came without hesitation. I would stop assuming the system is designed to tell me the truth. Then she was gone. I stayed in the kitchen long after my coffee cooled. Because for the first time, the question wasn't whether Simon had manipulated the data. It was whether my life had been curated, and whether I was brave enough to find out by whom. I told myself I was there for verification, not for him, not for the way my chest tightened before I even saw him, like my body had learned a shortcut my mind refused to acknowledge. Simon's lab looked different in the evening. Quieter, dimmer. The hum of machines softened into something almost domestic. Less innovation hub. More place where people stayed awake because something fragile was sleeping. He found me studying a wall of patient scans. You're back, he said, not surprised. I'm observing, I replied. Professional curiosity. He snorted. That's the worst kind. Still, he handed me a visitor badge and motioned for me to follow. We passed rows of workstations, half-packed takeout boxes, notes scrawled in marker on glass. The staff nodded to him, tired but warm. Not deference, familiarity. Before you accuse me of propaganda, Simon said, I want you to meet someone. The patient wing was smaller than I expected. Only 6 rooms. Soft light, real beds instead of capsules. He stopped at the third door and knocked once before entering. Inside, an omega sat propped against pillows, dark curls pulled into a loose knot, 4-line glowing faintly with monitored serum. Hey Noah, Simon said. How's the miracle of modern medicine treating you? Noah rolled his eyes. Ask me again when it stops tasting like a metal regret. Simon smiled as he moved closer, scanning the monitors. The shift in him was subtle but unmistakable. Founder fell away. What remained was a man counting breaths. This is Ryan, he said. He works with investment structures. Noah's gaze sharpened with immediate, instinctive wariness. And I work, Noah replied, with the consequences of them. I deserve that. What's your diagnosis? I asked quietly. Simon hesitated just long enough for me to feel it. Systemic degradation, he said. Secondary to unregulated enhancement therapy. Noah shrugged one shoulder. Black market meds. Promised stability. Got lottery organs instead. The words were light. The smile wasn't. They told me it would make my heat cycle safer, Noah continued. Cheaper than licensed treatment. No questions. My jaw tightened. What happened? I asked. Simon adjusted the drip. They altered receptor compatibility. His body started rejecting its own hormone patterns. And you? I asked. Are teaching it how to listen again, Simon replied. Noah grinned. Translation. He's keeping me from becoming a very dramatic obituary. Simon huffed. You're dramatic enough. They bantered easily. Familiar. Earned. Do you sell any part of this? I asked. Simon looked at me sharply. No, he said. We treat. We stabilize. We publish. We don't package people. Noah studied me. You look like someone who just learned his house might be built on a sinkhole. Something like that. We left him resting, monitors steady, vitals soft with sleep. Outside the room, I exhaled without realizing I'd been holding air. He's one of 12, Simon said. 12 we can reach. There are hundreds we can't. I rubbed a hand over my face. Why are you doing this alone? He considered me. Because institutions move slowly. And bodies don't. We stood in the hallway, the space between us charged with something neither of us named. Come on, he said finally. I need coffee that doesn't come from a machine that hates me. We stepped out into the night. The city had cooled. Lights reflected slick against the pavement. Simon bought 2 coffees from a corner shop that smelled like sugar and steam. We leaned against the brick wall, shoulder to shoulder, not quite touching. I checked some of our records, I admitted. There are inconsistencies. His head tilted slightly. That's new. I don't think, I went on, that I authorized everything tied to my name. He watched me carefully now. Not accusing. Assessing. That's not exoneration, he said. No, I agreed. But it's not nothing. A pause. Why come back? Simon asked. I stared at the street. At the way the light bent in puddles. Because, I said, if I'm standing on a fault line, I need to know how deep it goes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, side effects of this job include insomnia, moral injury, and very bad coffee. He glanced at me. And apparently, he added, warmth bloomed unexpectedly, low and unguarded. It scared me more than the data ever had. Because cracks in systems were dangerous. But cracks in control? Those were how things got in. The Hale estate had been designed to look welcoming. Warm stone, wide windows, gardens that curved gently instead of towering. Even the security felt discreet, tucked into hedges and architectural angles, as if danger were something impolite that should be hidden from guests. I'd grown up here, which meant I knew exactly how much of it was a set. Dinner was served in the East Hall, where the ceiling rose like a cathedral, and the table could comfortably seat a small government. My mother sat at the head, Daniel at her right, 2 empty chairs beyond them that used to belong to people who no longer visited. I took my place. The staff moved like choreography. Plates appeared. Wine breathed. Conversation started where it always did, with the market. The volatility will stabilize, Daniel was saying. We've already redirected interest. Public memory is brief, Mother replied, and loyalty is structural. I cut into my food. Didn't taste it. They accused us, I said. They both looked at me as if I'd commented on the weather. They speculated, Mother corrected. They showed documents. They showed projections, Daniel said lightly. Anyone can animate a narrative. I set my fork down. There are inconsistencies in our records. A beat. Mother's gaze sharpened. Inconsistencies are normal in legacy systems. These weren't clerical. They never are, Daniel said. That's what makes them manageable. The familiar heat returned. Heavier now. I spoke with one of his patients, I said. An omega, black market enhancement therapy. His condition matches the supply chains he outlined. Mother folded her napkin with precision. Ryan, you are extrapolating from anecdote. I'm responding to evidence. You're responding to atmosphere, she replied. And you're letting an alpha with a tragic backstory redirect your sense of responsibility. The dismissal stung more than the insult. You taught me to analyze risk, I said. Yes, she agreed. And to isolate it. Daniel swirled his wine. You're not equipped for this kind of optics. That's not a failure. That's design. Design, I repeated. You stabilize, he said. You buffer. You make complex structures palatable. Mother met my eyes. You are our most liquid asset. The word slid cleanly across the table. Asset. Liquid. Something inside me surged upward. Sudden and burning. I'm not a commodity, I said. She didn't flinch. Everything within an institution is. My chest felt too small. You're emotional, Daniel said gently, which means you're close to making mistakes, or close to noticing them. Mother's tone cooled. You exist within this fund because you are useful to it. The room went very quiet. Not because you are powerful, she added. Not because you are irreplaceable. But because you translate volatility into trust. I stood so abruptly, my chair scraped against stone. Then maybe, I said, your trust deserves volatility. Daniel's expression hardened. Sit down, he ordered. I didn't. This ends, Mother said. You will distance yourself from that startup. You will allow legal to restructure the narrative. You will remember where you belong. Belong. The word tasted wrong. I left without finishing dinner. The terrace air hit like cold water. Night wind moved through the gardens, carrying earth and flowers and the faint metallic edge of the city beyond the walls. I pressed both hands to the stone railing and breathed. Asset. Interface. Liquid. Useful. My phone was already in my hand. I didn't think. I just went. Simon's lab lights were still on when I arrived, but he wasn't in the main space. I found him in his office, sleeves rolled, staring at a projection of medical data like it might argue back. He looked up, surprised. You're late, he said. I had dinner, I replied. With my owners. His brow furrowed. Don't do that, he said quietly. Do what? Talk like you've already lost. I stepped closer. Too fast. You think you know what's happening, I said, heat sharp in my voice. You think you can map a system from the outside and declare yourself the truth. His eyes darkened. And you think proximity to power makes you innocent. I think you're pushing me toward conclusions you want. And I think, he shot back, you're terrified of conclusions you can't control. Silence cracked between us. I could feel him then. The warmth, the tension, the pull in my chest like a tide with no shoreline. I'm trying to understand, I said, quieter. So am I, he replied. The difference is, I'm not protected from what I find. The words landed because they were true. And because they hurt. I turned away before either of us could say something we couldn't rearrange. Anger was easier than fear. But fear had already followed me inside. The old server level hadn't been in use since before the fund's last major expansion. Which was precisely why I went there. No staff. No motion-optimized lighting. No curated accessibility. Just a long corridor of obsolete metal doors and the low, animal hum of machines that had outlived the people who built them. I accessed the level manually. No biometric greeting. No voice prompt. Just code. The server room smelled like dust and ozone. Rows of aging towers blinked in asynchronous patterns, their lights uneven, imperfect. This was where the fund's first-generation archives lived. Before aesthetic transparency. Before automated narrative control. Before my mother. I opened my private partition. Every managing director maintained one. Officially for personal annotations. Unofficially for the things no system liked to remember. Failed deals, internal objections, human noise. Mine was mostly empty, which, in retrospect, should have been suspicious. I began reconstructing authorization trails from the raw logs. Not the polished summaries, the source movements, and there it was. My name. Again, but not as an endpoint, as a mask. The system visualized biometric sequences, pressure curves, rhythm imprints, neural signature approximations harvested from years of legitimate signings. My signing behavior had been learned, replicated, automated. A model unfolded on the screen, mapping how my signature evolved across contracts I had never touched. It wasn't stolen once. It was grown. I scrolled back. 5 years. 7. 10. Contracts bloomed across the display. Investment authorizations. Secondary approvals. Compliance acknowledgements. Each bearing my name. Each authenticated. Each impossible. My hands went cold. I overlaid location data. The discrepancies aligned into a pattern so elegant it was obscene. My travel logs, public appearances, family events. Every false authorization had been timed to moments when my presence was provable elsewhere. A perfect alibi. Not just a forgery, a design. I sat back slowly, the chair's movement too loud in the quiet room. They hadn't hidden the crime. They had hidden me inside it. I pulled up the earliest instance. I was 22, still in graduate training, still thrilled to be allowed into meetings, still believing proximity meant participation. The contract approved the fund's first entry into advanced biological commodities, omega-source medical substrates. My stomach twisted. I opened the attachment files, internal memos, ethics reviews stripped to single lines, revenue projections, every one of them countersigned by a name that looked like mine and had never belonged to me. My vision tunneled. The air felt wrong. Too thin, too slow. I stood, then immediately had to brace one hand against the server rack as the room tilted. This wasn't misdirection. It wasn't corruption that had grown around me. It was architecture. I wasn't a manager who'd been careless. I was a shield, a moral interface, the face of continuity they could slide in front of anything. My pulse stuttered. I left the server room without shutting anything down. My apartment lights came on automatically, soft and inoffensive. I didn't remember crossing the city. I went straight to the bathroom, hands shaking as I turned the sink on full cold. Water hit porcelain too loudly. I gripped the counter, breathed in. Nothing happened. My chest refused to expand. The pressure inside me rose, sharp and absolute, like something enormous trying to push through too small a door. I dropped to the floor, tiles cold against my palms, my knees, my cheek. The room narrowed to sound and sensation, the roar of water, the violent drum of my heart, the strange, humiliating tremor in my hands. I couldn't get air. My vision sparked white at the edges. Forgery. The word looped. Years. Contracts. Bodies. My name. I pressed a fist to my sternum like I could force my ribs apart. Nothing. My throat worked uselessly. My phone buzzed somewhere. I didn't reach for it. A sound tore out of me that wasn't quite a breath. Not a word. Just evidence that something inside had finally found a crack. I stayed on the floor until the cold crept into my bones and the water soaked the hem of my clothes. Until my lungs remembered how to behave. Until the idea of standing didn't feel like a lie. They hadn't just used my signature. They had built an entire history around it. And now that history was mine, whether I claimed it or not. I didn't plan to go to Simon. I just didn't go anywhere else. His building was quieter than mine. Older. Realer. The kind of place where people argued about laundry and left bicycles chained to stair rails. The hallway light flickered. Someone's dinner smelled like garlic and citrus and heat. I knocked once. Then again. The door opened. Simon froze when he saw me. Whatever he'd expected, it hadn't been this. My hair was still damp. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I was very aware suddenly that I was breathing like someone who'd run a long way without remembering the run. "Ryan?" he said. I didn't answer. I stepped forward and then, embarrassingly, had to brace a hand against the doorframe as my knees threatened to fold. His reaction was immediate, not alarmed. Focused. He caught my elbow. "Hey." "Easy." The contact grounded me more than it should have. "I found it," I said. Didn't ask what. He stepped back to let me in, closed the door, and guided me toward the couch. "Sit," he said, not ordering. Placing. I did. The apartment smelled like coffee and clean fabric and something faintly warm beneath it. Him. Not the sharpness of the lab. Something lower, quieter. "I went into the old servers," I said. The words stacked awkwardly, like they weren't designed to hold weight. "They've been using my signature. For years. Not stealing it, training it." He stayed still. "They built a biometric model. Pressure curves, behavioral imprinting. My name is on things I was never near. Silence. They timed everything. So I could never contradict it." I laughed once. It was wrong, too thin. "I wasn't careless," I said. "I was curated." Simon's jaw flexed. I waited for anger. For accusation, for the shift that would turn me from confused asset to responsible villain. "I thought you'd hate me," I admitted. "Or at least, be relieved. To finally have a face." "I do have a face," he said. I looked up. "It's theirs," he continued. "Not yours." The words landed somewhere behind my ribs. "They used you," Simon said quietly. "The same way they used everyone else. Just cleaner, Something hot pressed against my eyes. I don't know how to undo this, I said. I don't even know who I am outside it. He moved then. Sat across from me, close enough that I could feel warmth through the space between our knees. You were the door, he said. That doesn't make you the room. I swallowed. You were how it passed, he went on. Not why it existed. My hands twisted together. What if everything I am is built on it? I asked. Then you dismantle it, he replied. I looked at him sharply. That fund isn't just money, I said. It's influence, regulatory insulation, political capital. It's families, careers, systems. I know, Simon said. And if I go after it, I continued, I lose everything. He held my gaze. You lose what was built for you. The apartment felt too small. What do I gain? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then, your name, the word, resonated. I can access internal records, I said slowly. Compliance pathways, shadow approvals. I can show who routed what and when. Simon leaned forward, forearms on his knees. You'd have to burn your way out. I know. And they won't let you. I know. A beat. You don't owe me this, he said. I looked at him. At some point he continued, this stops being about my sister, or my patients, or my company. It becomes your war. I inhaled. The air felt steadier here. I don't want a war, I said. What do you want? I closed my eyes. Silence, I answered. When I opened them again, he was watching me like I'd said something sacred. Then, Simon said, you dismantle the noise. We stood without planning it. The balcony door stood open to the night. The city stretched beyond it, indifferent and bright and full of moving pieces. We stepped outside. Cold air slid over my skin. The world smelled like rain and distant heat, and under it, that familiar, unnameable thread of him. I can start tomorrow, I said. If I don't, I won't. Simon rested his hands on the railing beside mine, not touching. Ryan, he said, once you open that system, it won't close around you again. I watched traffic move like blood through the streets. Good, I replied. He nodded once. Not approval, alignment, and in the space between us, something irreversible settled into place. Not trust. Not yet. But a direction. And for the first time since my name had betrayed me, I chose where to walk. Systems don't collapse the way buildings do. There is no single sound, no cinematic fracture. They unravel, quietly at first, through channels designed for discretion, through signatures that no longer know who they belong to. I started with the regulator, not the press, not law enforcement, the regulatory authority that had audited Hale Venture Group for decades and never once truly seen it. I didn't walk in through the front doors. I uploaded encrypted packets, time-stamped logs, biometric replication models, authorization trails cross-referenced against my verified physical locations, every forgery, every shell, every medical commodities funnel. When the first acknowledgement pinged back, my hands were steady. That frightened me more than fear would have. By midday, 3 oversight departments had active investigations. By evening, the fund's internal network began locking itself down without being told. That was when I knew they had seen it too. The press came next. Not tabloids, not commentary, data journalists, financial crime desks, the kind of reporters who didn't need outrage because they had documents. I didn't give interviews. I gave access. Within hours, Hale Venture Group's name started appearing beside words it had never permitted near itself. Biological exploitation, identity replication, omega-derived commodities. The language spread. The market followed. When I arrived at the fund, the lobby was chaos wrapped in professionalism. Phones rang and rang without being answered. Assistants moved too fast, eyes too wide. Screens scrolled headlines where quarterly growth charts used to live. Security didn't stop me. They still recognized my face. That would change. The council room was already full. Not just my mother and Daniel, but legal representatives, crisis consultants, board members who had flown in overnight. The air vibrated with rehearsed calm. Mother stood when I entered. "Sit," she said. I didn't. "You've overstepped," she continued. "You have no authority to release internal records without—" "I have full authority," I replied. "They're authenticated under my credentials." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You fabricated a narrative." "No," I said. "I exposed one. You think regulators will protect you?" he asked. "They protect structures." "Then," I said, "I've made the structure radioactive." A lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale, this level of disclosure creates personal liability." I met his gaze. "Good." Mother raised a hand. The room stilled. She walked toward me slowly, heels precise against stone. "You are destroying a system that predates you," she said. "A system that feeds thousands of families. A system that feeds on them," I corrected. Her eyes sharpened. "You are emotional. I'm documented." "This fund," she said, "is your inheritance." "No," I replied. "It was my cover." The words struck deeper than I'd expected. Daniel laughed softly. "You think you can walk away from this?" "I think," I said, "that you can't." His smile vanished. "You were never meant to be autonomous," he snapped. "You were meant to stabilize." "I did," I said. "This is stabilization." Mother stopped an arm's length away. "Without us," she said quietly, "you are nothing." The sentence had been polished over years. I felt it reach for its usual place inside me. It didn't find it. "I was never nothing," I said. "I was unaccounted." For a moment, something like calculation flickered across her face. Then her expression reset. "You are choosing annihilation," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm choosing authorship." Sirens cut faintly through the glass walls. Not dramatic. Administrative. The sound of doors somewhere in the building unlocking in ways they had never unlocked before. A man in a dark suit stepped into the room, badge visible. "Evelyn Hale?" he said. Mother didn't turn. "Yes. We have a warrant." The room fractured. Voices rose. Chairs scraped. Phones were lifted and forgotten in the same motion. Daniel stared at me like I had become a stranger wearing his brother's face. "You did this," he said. I met his eyes. "Yes." Security stood uncertainly at the edges, their loyalty colliding with jurisdiction. The officers moved past me. Mother didn't resist when they took her arm. She only watched me. Not with anger. With distance. As if I had finally exited the category she'd built for me. I left the building while they were still reading her rights. Outside, the city was very loud. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted names I didn't answer. Somewhere behind me, Hale Venture Group was being dismantled in real time. And for the first time in my life, the noise didn't feel like pressure. It felt like proof. The system wasn't swallowing me. It was losing its mouth. My apartment emptied itself faster than I expected. The fund's housing agreement evaporated with the accounts. Security access revoked. Services discontinued. Art that had never quite felt like mine carefully inventoried and removed by people who didn't meet my eyes. By the end of the week, I stood in a space that echoed when I moved. No screens, no city-curated silence, just bare walls, a mattress the movers had left because it wasn't worth billing, and a single suitcase that looked embarrassed to be there. Zero assets. The phrase drifted through my head like a joke without a punchline. I moved into a studio 3 neighborhoods away. 3rd floor. No elevator. Windows that stuck. A kitchen that seemed to resent the idea of food. The first night, I sat on the floor and ate cereal out of a mug. It tasted like survival. The second morning, I went to a grocery store that didn't know who I was. No personal shoppers. No biometric checkout. I stood frozen in the cereal aisle, overwhelmed by 40 brands of something I had never once chosen. "Pick the one with the bird," an elderly man beside me said kindly. "They're honest about sugar." I took it. The register accepted my card without comment. The lack of ceremony felt like a small miracle. I met Simon at a corner cafe that afternoon. Not a sleek one. One with uneven tables and a chalkboard menu that threatened poetry. He arrived in a hoodie, hair still damp from a shower, a paper bag of pastries already in his hand. "You look," he said, sitting across from me, "like someone who's been personally betrayed by household appliances." "My stove beeped at me," I replied. "Aggressively." He smiled. It landed. We ate. We didn't talk about the fund at first. We talked about the barista who spelled my name wrong, about the new intern who had accidentally dyed half the lab gloves blue, about how the croissants here were too ambitious. Normal things. Eventually he asked, "Where are you staying?" I told him. His brow creased. "Is it safe? Emotionally or structurally?" He snorted. "Both. I have running water," I said, "and a door that locks." Most of the time, he studied me. "You don't regret it." I shook my head. "I miss convenience," I admitted. "I miss not thinking about grocery prices. I miss a life where my calendar didn't feel like a dare, but I don't miss myself." He didn't speak, which was exactly right. After coffee, we walked. No destination, just the city letting us move through it. At a crosswalk, he offered his scarf without a word. I took it without pretending I didn't need it. Our shoulders brushed. I felt it then. The absence. No building watching me. No system anticipating me. No inheritance shaping my choices. The quiet after collapse. "You're allowed to rest," Simon said suddenly. "I don't know how." "I do," he replied. Professionally, that earned a laugh I hadn't rehearsed. We stood there while traffic slid past, my breath fogging faintly in his borrowed warmth. "Thank you," I said. "For the scarf? For not making this a trial?" His gaze softened. "You've already testified," he said. "Now you get to live." I looked down at my hands. They were empty, and for the first time, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like room. There's a particular kind of quiet that comes after collapse, not the stunned silence of shock. The other one, the kind where the world has already accepted what happened and is waiting to see what you'll do with it. My world had shrunk to a studio apartment, a borrowed scarf, and a bank account that looked like it had survived a small war. But it wasn't empty. Not yet. There were still things I owned. Not properties, not shares, objects. A watch my grandfather had given me, before the fund absorbed his name into a logo. A small collection of early acquisition art I'd taken down myself before the auditors arrived. A vintage car I had never driven but always maintained because it was expected. Symbols. I made a list. Then I started selling. Not through the family channels. Independent brokers. Private collectors. Auctions that didn't care where the money came from, only where it was going. The watch went first. I wore it to the appointment. Took it off myself. Set it into velvet. It felt like pulling a splinter out of a scar and realizing it had been there longer than the skin. The car went next. The art after. Each sale reduced my past into numbers. Each deposit made the present heavier. When I totaled it all, the amount surprised me. Not because it was large, because it was enough. Enough to build something instead of maintaining something. I didn't tell Simon what I was doing until the funds cleared. He found out when I walked into his lab carrying a folder instead of a coffee. "That's ominous," he said. "People bring folders when they're about to change someone's life or ruin it." "Which one are you hoping for?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "I like surprises that don't involve subpoenas." "Sit," I said. His brow lifted. Then he did. I slid the folder across the table. Inside were account confirmations, transfer authorizations, a formal investment proposal stripped of fund language and institutional armor. Just my name. He didn't touch it. "What is this?" he asked. "Me," I replied. Trying to be precise. "Ryan, I sold everything that wasn't nailed down or actively judging me," I continued. "It's not venture capital. It's not scalable. It won't make your board comfortable." He opened the folder. "Read." Once, then again. His jaw set. "This is too much," he said. "It's not enough," I countered. "But it's honest." He closed the folder. "You don't owe me this." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm doing it." He exhaled slowly. eyes fixed on the table between us. "If this fails," he said, "you won't have a fallback." I nodded. "I'm aware. If this succeeds, you'll be tied to my company, to my work, to my war." I watched him carefully. "I'm not investing in your war," I said. "I'm investing in your medicine." He looked up. "And," I added, "in the man who practices it." The room went very still. I hadn't planned to say it like that. It simply arrived, whole. "I don't know what we are," I continued. "I don't know how to do this without structures or titles or expectations." His eyes darkened. "But I know," I said, "that when everything else was stripped away, you were what didn't feel like a transaction." Silence stretched. Then he stood, slowly, not abruptly. He came around the table and stopped in front of me. "Ryan," he said quietly, "this is not a safe place to put your last ground." "I'm not looking for safe," I replied. "I'm looking for real." Something in his expression shifted. Not caution, recognition. He rested a hand over mine. "Just there. Just contact. No claim. No pressure. I accept," Simon said. "Both." My breath left me in a way that wasn't panic. Not relief either. Something steadier. "I don't know what comes next," I admitted. He squeezed my fingers once. "Good." I laughed under my breath. Because for the first time, the future didn't look like a projection. It looked like a question. And I had chosen to answer it. Time didn't fix everything, but it reorganized it. 3 months after Hale Venture Group became a case study instead of a corporation, Simon's lab no longer fit in its building, which was a good problem. The patient wing had doubled. The research staff had tripled. The coffee machine had been replaced twice and still hated everyone equally. I had a desk now, not a corner office, not glass-walled, a real desk, scratched, slightly uneven, close enough to the windows that I could hear the city arguing with itself. My name was on the door. Not because of inheritance, because I paid for the paint. Lena joined the team in the 2nd month. She arrived carrying a single bag and a resignation letter she didn't need anymore. "I'm not an analyst," she said carefully. "Not the way you're used to." "Good," Simon replied. "We already have too many people who know how to translate harm into graphs." She smiled faintly. Her work transformed the lab's internal ethics pipeline. She built systems that didn't just flag risk, but centered consent. Not compliance. Consent. Watching her speak in meetings felt like witnessing someone exhale after years underwater. So did watching myself. I didn't manage capital anymore. I managed process. Flow. Transparency. I learned the difference between investment and stewardship. Between growth and extraction, between partnership and control. Simon was still an alpha, still sharp, still intense, still infuriatingly unwilling to eat meals on time. But he didn't take up space the way men in my family had. He made it. There were nights we worked late, backs to each other, sharing playlists and deadlines and the occasional pastry someone forgot to label. There were mornings he brewed coffee in my kitchen like he belonged there, and then pretended he didn't. There were silences that didn't need filling. One afternoon he appeared beside my desk and set a thin folder down. Before the board meeting, he said. I looked at the cover. Foundational Partnership Agreement. I felt the old reflex stir. Signature. Authority. Impact. Then I breathed. And opened it. The document wasn't about control. It outlined ethical constraints, oversight structures, shared veto rights, exit protections, not ownership, alignment. I want you to read it, Simon said, not as an investor. As yourself. I am, I replied. He watched me carefully as I went through it. Slowly, not searching for traps, understanding. At the last page he passed me a pen. My hand paused. Just for a moment. Memory hovered. Glass screens. Glowing signatures. A name that hadn't been mine. I set the pen to paper anyway. The ink moved where I told it to. My signature formed under my fingers, familiar and unremarkable, and wholly my own. No replication. No shadow. Just motion. I finished. Handed it back. Simon didn't look at it. He looked at me. That, he said, was the first time you didn't flinch. I noticed, I replied. Later, after the meeting, after the emails, after the small, almost shy celebration someone organized around a cake that had definitely been experimental, we stood on the fire escape outside the lab. The city hummed. Life went on. Do you ever miss it? Simon asked. The scale, the reach. I considered. I miss thinking power meant distance, I said. It was simpler. And now? Now I think power is proximity, I answered. To consequence. To people. To myself. He leaned on the railing beside me. Our shoulders touched. Not claimed. Shared. Below us, traffic braided light through the streets. Somewhere, an Omega laughed. Somewhere, a lab monitor beeped. Somewhere, a system continued to break in ways no one could monetize. I watched the sky shift colors above the buildings. And for the first time, my name didn't feel like something that could be taken. It felt like something that could be offered. For the first time in my life, my signature didn't authorize a system. It introduced a person.